You are just a lowly maid." Charlotte Alden's voice sliced through the warm afternoon air like broken glass. Every table at the veranda fell silent. Forks hovered midair. Conversations died on people's lips. All eyes turned toward the center aisle of the garden restaurant, where Maya Williams stood frozen beside a long banquet table. A tall crystal vase filled with ivory roses had shifted slightly just an inch. It hadn't fallen, hadn't spilled, but it was enough. Enough for her skin to become a target. Charlotte stood tall in her fitted satin wedding gown, the sun catching the shimmer of the pearl-embroidered bodice. "Look what you've done," she snapped, pointing at the arrangement. "God, is it so hard to do one thing right? This is a wedding, not a church potluck." Maya didn't move. Her breath slowed as the words sank in. She had worked this job long enough to hear condescension wrapped in politeness. But today, there was no veil. "I'm sorry," Maya said calmly. "It's only shifted slightly. I'll adjust it now." But Charlotte's mother, Margaret Alden, stepped forward, lips pursed like she'd bitten a lemon. "That's not how we do things here. You people should know better than to touch what you can't afford." Maya's hands paused mid-reach. "You people?" Margaret met her gaze without flinching. "Help, staff, whatever you want to call yourselves." Her eyes flicked to Maya's skin. "This is why we ask the agency to be more selective. Appearances matter." The murmur among the guests turned into a hush that seemed to grip the entire garden. Maya felt it all, the weight of eyes, the sting of being diminished not for what she had done, but for who she was. Charlotte crossed her arms, voice laced with venom. "Don't act like you don't know what we mean. You're just background. That's your role. So if you want to keep your little paycheck, maybe you should drop to your knees and apologize. Publicly." Maya straightened slowly, the vase steady in her hand. "I've already apologized. I'll fix the centerpiece, but I won't kneel." Charlotte's cheeks turned red. "You people always act like victims, always trying to act like you belong in our world." A collective gasp swept across the lawn. Glass clinked somewhere in the distance. Then came a new voice, low, measured, yet vibrating with restrained fury. "What did you just say?" Grant Kingsley, the groom. He had stepped forward from behind the floral archway, tall and imposing in his tailored tuxedo. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were locked on Charlotte. Charlotte blinked. "Darlings, he disrespected me." Grant didn't move. "And you disrespected my father." Charlotte froze. "My father," he continued, "is a black man, the man who raised me, the man you invited to sit in the front row today. When you talk down to Maya like that, you're not just insulting her, you're insulting him, and you're insulting me. If you felt the weight of Grant's stance, if Maya's quiet refusal spoke louder than any shout, then don't let this moment pass. Like if you believe dignity is worth more than diamonds, and comment where you're watching from someone near you might need this story too." Margaret bristled. "Grant, let's take this privately." He cut her off with a look. "Number, this is public. You both made it public." He turned to the gathering guests. "I won't marry into a family that looks at people like Maya and sees less than. I won't stand next to someone who believes skin color determines worth." Charlotte took a step forward, her voice cracking. "You're overreacting. Number, I'm seeing clearly for the first time." He pulled the ring from his finger, held it for a moment, then dropped it into Charlotte's trembling hand. "This wedding is off." Gasps, murmurs, and chairs scraping against concrete followed like waves breaking all at once. Several guests stood up, some leaving, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Charlotte looked around wildly, but no one came to her defense. Margaret opened her mouth, then closed it. Maya remained still. Her hands no longer trembled. She had said nothing cruel. She had told no lie. She had only refused to kneel. And that, somehow, was enough to turn a wedding into an awakening. Maya didn't remember how her feet moved. She only knew they did slowly, steadily away from the table, away from the wreckage of what was supposed to be the perfect wedding. The sunlight filtered through the oaks above, dappling the grass in golden shadow, but all she could feel was the weight of every eye tracking her back. She didn't cry. She didn't lower her gaze. Her apron was still tied tight around her waist, her name tag slightly crooked, her hands still dusted with the scent of roses and lemon polish. Behind her, the murmurs rose to a restless thrum. "Did that really just happen?" someone whispered. He walked away. Because of her? The voice wasn't angry, just stunned. But Maya knew that tone. It was the sound of discomfort, of people realizing they'd witnessed something they could no longer unsee. She reached the back of the garden, where the staff station was tucked behind the ivy-covered wall. A few fellow workers stood huddled near the ice bins and serving trays, mouths open, eyes wide. Maya. It was Carmen, the pastry assistant, barely 20, and still blinking in disbelief. Did the groom really cancel the wedding? Because of what Charlotte said to you? Maya exhaled slowly. He canceled it because of what he believes. I just happened to be the person who gave him a reason to speak up. Carmen shook her head. That was insane. I mean, it was amazing. But, you know they're going to blame you. I know. Maya's voice was quiet, but even. And your job. I know that too. For a long moment, no one said anything. Just the sound of birds and the distant clinking of glasses from guests who were already filing out, the ceremony never to begin. Then a voice behind them broke the stillness. Miss William? Maya turned. It was Mr. Langston, the general manager of the veranda. A man with salt and pepper hair, always impeccably dressed, and always keeping his voice at that perfect middle tone, never warm, never cruel, just firm. I need to speak with you in the office, he said. The air seemed to shift around her. Carmen touched Maya's arm gently. Maya nodded once and followed. The manager's office was small, lined with white cabinets and outdated posters of employee standards. Mr. Langston didn't sit. He simply closed the door, folded his arms, and looked at her for a long time before speaking. I'm going to be honest with you, Maya. This is a disaster. I understand. Do you? He asked, not unkindly. This was the highest profile wedding we've ever hosted. The Aldens were about to sign a recurring private events contract. After today, that's gone. I didn't raise my voice, Maya said. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't touch her. You didn't kneel. No, she said quietly. I didn't. Mr. Langston stared at her, something unreadable crossing his face. You're a good worker. Never late. Clients have always liked you. But now I have 2 angry women out there telling every guest that this wedding was sabotaged by staff. I'm getting calls from media already. Maya's shoulders remained straight. So, am I fired? There was a long pause. Technically, number. But I'm going to put you on paid leave for now, until this blows over. Maya nodded. She'd expected worse. May I collect my things? Mr. Langston hesitated, then stepped aside. Yes. She stepped out of the office, her heart oddly calm. There was nothing left to argue for here. Her bag was in the break room, tucked beneath the cubby labeled MW. She reached for it, slinging it over her shoulder as the door opened behind her. It was Marcus, the young barback with dreadlocks and sneakers that always squeaked against the floor. I saw the whole thing, he said, eyes burning. That wasn't just rude. That was hate. Maya said nothing. I've been waiting for someone to speak up. I didn't think it'd be you, though. His voice cracked with admiration. They told us to stay quiet. Always stay quiet. I wasn't trying to make a scene, she said. You didn't. You made a stand. She looked at him, this kid who was barely old enough to drink, who cleaned up spilled champagne for rich strangers every weekend and learned to smile through being invisible. He didn't look invisible now. He looked alive. I'm proud of you, he said softly. Maya blinked. Thank you, Marcus. She stepped out into the parking lot and was halfway to her old Corolla when she heard footsteps behind her. Maya. It was Grant. She turned, startled. He was no longer in the tuxedo jacket, just the white dress shirt rolled up to his elbows, collar loosened, no tie. His face still held the weight of what had just unraveled, but there was something steadier in his walk now, like a man who'd finally stopped pretending. I'm sorry to stop you, he said, approaching slowly. I just needed to say something. You don't owe me anything, Mr. Kingsley. I think I do, he said. You stood when you didn't have to, and I saw it. I'll be honest, if you hadn't, I might have gone through with it. I might have ignored the voice in my head telling me something wasn't right. Maya frowned slightly. You would have found out sooner or later. Yeah, he said, but maybe not in time. She didn't know what to say. He looked tired, but not broken. Listen, he continued, shifting his weight. I'm not just a CEO. I help run a hospitality group. We're opening a new concept in Austin, small format, community-based, locally staffed, and I'm putting together a team, a leadership team. I want people who see the world for what it is, who don't flinch when it matters. Would you consider joining us? Maya stared at him. Doing what? Managing, front-of-house operations, hiring, culture. We're building this place from scratch, Maya. I want it to be a space where no one is ever asked to kneel for dignity. She swallowed hard. The weight of the day crashed into her all at once. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a chance to build something better. The wind blew a curl of her hair across her face. She brushed it aside. I'll think about it. He smiled. Fair enough. As he turned to walk away, she called after him. Grant? He looked back. Thank you for seeing what they didn't. I was raised to know better, he said. My father made sure of that. And then he was gone. Maya stood beside her car for a long time, watching the breeze move through the trees, lifting petals from the arch that would never be walked under. The wedding was off. Her job was gone. But for the first time in a long time, she felt something she hadn't felt since she was a little girl in her grandmother's kitchen, humming hymns and kneading dough. She felt seen, and that was more powerful than any apology. The next morning, Maya awoke to the sound of her phone buzzing against the nightstand. Her eyes were still heavy, her body sore from the long shift and even longer emotional weight of the day before. For a second, she didn't recall the garden, the shouting, the stares. Then the words came back like a slap. You are just a lowly maid. She sat up slowly, reaching for the phone. 53 missed notifications. The first message was from Carmen. Girl, you're everywhere. Check the news. The second was from Marcus. They're talking about you on the local station, and not in a bad way. She rubbed her face, got out of bed, and padded barefoot to the kitchen. The morning light spilled through her tiny apartment's windows, bouncing off the white tile like a quiet reassurance. She flicked on the television. And the wedding between Charlotte Alden and Grant Kingsley, CEO of the Kingsley Foundation's culinary division, has been officially called off, the anchor said. Eyewitnesses say the groom ended the event publicly after the bride and her mother verbally insulted one of the catering staff, Maya William, in what many are calling a blatant act of racial discrimination. Her breath caught. The screen cut to a shaky cell phone video someone had filmed the entire moment. There she was, standing beside the table, her hands steady, her voice calm. There was Charlotte, pointing, yelling. The moment Grant stepped in, the ring falling into Charlotte's hand. It played like a scene from a film, but it had been her life, her name, her skin. A headline rolled across the bottom. Number just a lowly maid trends as video of wedding incident goes viral. She reached for the remote, but before she could turn it off, her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She let it ring. And again. And again. There were voicemails, some from reporters asking for comment, others from complete strangers thanking her for standing up. One woman's voice cracked through tears. My daughter works in hospitality. She's been through what you went through. Thank you for not kneeling. Thank you. Maya turned off the phone and sat quietly. Her coffee brewed in the background, but she didn't move. Part of her wanted to shut it all out to pretend the world wasn't watching. But another part, deeper and steadier, knew this wasn't a moment to hide. By noon, her name was on morning radio segments, podcast discussion panels, and social media feeds. People shared their own stories of being looked down upon. The tag number Just a Lowly Maid had transformed into something powerful, a banner under which stories of injustice and dignity poured out like floodwater. But not all the voices were kind. Scrolling through a few comment sections, she saw the ugliness too. She ruined a rich girl's life for attention. She should have just done her job. Another angry black woman causing problems. It stung, not because it was new, but because it was loud. And yet none of it could drown out what Grant had said. You didn't cause a scene, you made a stand. That afternoon, the knock at the door was soft, almost hesitant. She opened it to find Ruth standing there, the older woman's arms filled with brown paper bags and a small foil-covered tray. I brought lunch, Ruth said, and some warmth. Maya smiled, stepping aside. Come in. You're braver than me out there with all this mess. Ruth's face was calm as ever. You think I'm scared of some noise on the news? Honey, I've been told to go to the back since 1973. You just gave people a new reason to push forward. They sat together at the small kitchen table, sharing collard greens, fried catfish, and sweet tea. It tasted like home, like memory. Ruth dabbed her napkin, then leaned in. You should know, they're panicking. Margaret Alden's PR team released a statement this morning. Said it was all a misunderstanding. Said you overreacted. Huh. Maya's jaw tightened. I said 2 words. I won't kneel. I know, Ruth said. They also lost 2 business sponsors, and Charlotte's father, he's distancing himself. Rumor is, their family brand may not survive this one. Maya didn't smile. She didn't want to feel joy over someone else's fall. But she did feel something deeper, the balance shifting. Later that evening, she received a message request on social media. The name made her freeze. Charlotte Alden. She opened it slowly. I'm sorry. For what I said. For how I said it. I was overwhelmed. I didn't mean it that way. I hope one day you can forgive me. No voice. No video. Just words, typed from behind a screen. Maya didn't respond. That night, her phone rang again. This time, it was a number she recognized. Grant. She answered after the second ring. Hi, he said, his voice low and steady. Hi. I didn't want to disturb you, he said. But I thought you should know I've met with my team today. We've decided to move forward with the new restaurant concept. We're calling it Uprise. We'll hire full-time staff, good wages, mental health support, education stipends, and every leadership position will be held by people of color. Maya blinked. That's incredible. I meant what I said, Maya. I want you on my team. Not as a symbol, not because of this incident, but because you're exactly the kind of person I trust to lead with grace under pressure. You were calm, composed. You knew your worth. She hesitated. I don't have a degree in management. I've never even led a team. You've led by example, he said. And that's more than most people with degrees ever learn. She swallowed the lump in her throat. Then yes, I accept. There was a long pause on the other end. A breath. Then, welcome aboard. They hung up. Maya sat in the quiet again. But this time the silence wasn't heavy. It was filled with potential. The kind that lingers in the air just before sunrise. In the days that followed, news of Uprise spread. Some praised the bold vision. Others called it reactive, divisive. But Grant didn't flinch, and neither did Maya. She met with the design team, walked through the half-finished restaurant space, an old jazz club being reborn. She sat in on hiring meetings. She spoke with community leaders. People came to her not for sympathy, but for guidance. And every time someone called her Miss William, or offered her a seat at the table, she remembered that day in the garden, that vase, that cloth, that voice yelling lowly Maid. She remembered not kneeling. And because she hadn't, everything changed. By the end of the week, a new plaque was installed at the front of the restaurant in progress. It read, Uprise, founded on dignity, led by grace, built for all. And beneath it, a smaller line in etched bronze, inspired by Maya William, who stood when silence was easier. The soft click of Maya's heels echoed through the unfinished space of Uprise as she walked past exposed brick walls and floor plans taped to every window. Outside, Austin shimmered beneath the late afternoon sun, but inside, the restaurant in the making pulsed with quiet anticipation. Sheet-covered booths, stacks of menus waiting for approval, and a whiteboard filled with real names of real people hung on the back wall with the title, First Round Hires. Maya read every name twice. Carmen, Marcus, Ruth. Her chest filled with something almost too big for breath. A week ago, she'd walked away from a job that made her invisible. Now, she stood at the helm of something that promised to make others feel seen. Maya, you've got a minute? Grant's voice called from behind her. She turned to see him step down from the contractor's office, sleeves rolled again, phone in one hand, a manila folder in the other. I wanted to go over the floor plan changes with you. We're thinking of adding a community table right in the center, large, family style. What do you think? She studied the space. That would be powerful. Shared meals, shared stories. Feels right. He smiled. Exactly. I want this place to feel like somewhere your grandmother could have walked into without a second glance. Maya smiled gently. She would have insisted on checking the spice rack first. Grant laughed, then grew quiet. Listen, the press is still circling. They've requested interviews with you, CNN, a couple podcasts. I've told them you'd decide on your own terms. Maya's face shifted. I'm not sure yet. I don't want to be turned into a headline. I want to build something real. That's the story. I get it, he said. And for what it's worth, you're already telling it by being here. As they walked the length of the restaurant together, workers nodded to Maya with familiarity and growing reverence. She wasn't a symbol to them, she was their manager, their decision-maker, someone who remembered their names, asked about their lives, noticed when their hands shook or their eyes looked tired. She didn't lead from above. She led shoulder to shoulder. That night, she stayed late. The crew had gone home. The music had been turned off, and the only sound left was the hum of the streetlights through the wide front windows. Maya sat at one of the unvarnished booths, a notebook open in front of her. She was working on a staff handbook, not one filled with rules, but values. The first page bore only 3 sentences. We don't kneel to cruelty. We rise to dignity. We serve with pride, never shame. A knock at the window startled her. She looked up to see a familiar face, Ruth, standing outside with a paper bag in one hand and that look that always said, "You're forgetting to eat again." Maya opened the door. "Let me guess. Collard greens? Mac and cheese too," Ruth said, lifting the bag. "Come on. You need to feed that fire in your belly." They sat together under the soft hanging lights in the corner booth. The food warmed the room as much as the company. "They still talking about you on the radio," Ruth said, unwrapping a slice of cornbread. "But you know what caught me? It wasn't the drama. It was how many people called in after. People who've worked in kitchens, hotels, hospitals. People who've swallowed their pride for a paycheck. You didn't just spark a moment, Maya. You cracked something open." "I didn't want to," Maya said, her voice quiet. "I just didn't want to be humiliated." "And that's the thing," Ruth replied. "You stood up for yourself, but in doing that, you gave others permission to stand too." Maya stirred her sweet tea slowly. "Sometimes I wonder, what if he hadn't heard it? What if Grant hadn't stepped in?" Ruth's gaze was sharp, but kind. "Then you'd still be here, because you didn't rise because of him. He just happened to be watching." Later, after Ruth left, Maya walked back to the whiteboard with the staff list. She picked up the dry erase marker and wrote something above all the names. Everyone belongs. No exceptions. The next morning brought more than sunlight. It brought a letter, hand-delivered by courier, addressed to her personally. She opened it with hesitation, expecting media or worse legal trouble from the Aldens. Instead, it was from Grant's adoptive father, Harold Kingsley. "Maya, you don't know me personally, but I watched what happened last week with great interest and greater pride. My son was raised to believe that dignity matters more than decor. And when I saw how you stood and how calm you were, I saw my mother in you. I saw every woman who once wiped the tables no one else saw, but who kept their heads high anyway. Thank you for reminding this country of what grace under fire looks like. If you're ever in Chicago, dinner's on me. With respect, Harold Kingsley." She folded the letter slowly, feeling the weight of it, not just the paper, but the recognition. Later that week, Uprise hosted its first private pre-opening dinner, a soft launch for community leaders, kitchen workers, bus drivers, school teachers, and elders from local churches. No press. No press releases. Just a shared meal, cooked and served with heart. Maya stood near the front, greeting each guest personally. When Marcus arrived with his mother on his arm, Maya embraced him. When Carmen showed up in heels too high for comfort, she grinned and whispered, "You clean up well." When Ruth entered, every member of the kitchen staff applauded. At the end of the evening, Grant raised a glass of sweet tea. "I'd like to make a toast," he said, voice rich and steady, "to dignity, not given, chosen, defended, lived, and to the woman who reminded us all that standing tall is not about posture but about purpose." Maya's cheeks flushed. She looked around the room, not at decorations or chandeliers, but at the people, at the fullness of the table, at the laughter that no one had to fake, at the sense of belonging that didn't require a name tag to earn. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she was just serving the table. She was part of it. And the seat she'd taken? She'd built it herself. The second week of Uprise's soft launch began with a line out the door. Word had spread through the neighborhood like wildfire, but not through flashy ads or billboards. It was whispered from barber shops to bus stops, shared in text chains and church bulletins. Uprise had become more than a restaurant, it was a signal. That someone like them had built something, and it was open to everyone. No dress code for dignity, no bouncer for kindness. Maya stood near the entrance, clipboard in hand, moving between guests and staff like the conductor of a quiet symphony. She was dressed in navy slacks and a rust blouse that matched the warm tones of the wood-paneled walls. Her hair was braided and pulled neatly into a bun, practical but still elegant. Every now and then, someone stopped to hug her, shake her hand, or whisper thank you. She always responded with the same calm sincerity. This wasn't about her. This was about what they were building together. At precisely 12:42 p.m., Maya noticed a man slip in through the crowd. Mid-40s, white, with the kind of demeanor that screamed polished yet probing. He wore a navy suit with no tie and carried a leather notebook. He didn't ask for a table, just moved slowly, scanning the room like someone more interested in the story than the menu. Maya's eyes followed him as he chose a two-top table near the back, pulled out a chair, and opened the notebook. No phone, no laptop, just pen and paper, old school, observant, purposeful. Grant approached a few moments later, looking up from his phone. "Did you see him too?" Maya nodded. "He's not local. New York plates on the car he came out of," Grant muttered. "And he's not here for lunch. I'm betting he's press." Maya didn't flinch. "Let him watch." You sure? If we're doing this for the right reasons, we don't hide from it," she said. Grant exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "That's why you're in charge." She smiled faintly and walked to the kitchen. "Make sure Ruth doesn't oversalt the greens. You know she gets salty when she's nervous." Ruth barked a laugh from the stovetop. "Girl, please. I've been cooking since before you knew what seasoning was. I'm not nervous. He should be." Laughter rippled through the kitchen. At the back table, the man continued to scribble notes. Occasionally, he would glance up and watch Maya speak to a child about his allergy, or kneel beside an elder to ask how the cornbread tasted. He wrote down staff names when they introduced themselves. He never pulled out a recorder, never took a photo, just listened. Hours later, just as Maya was preparing to take her short break, the man approached her quietly near the bar. "Miss William?" She turned. "That's me." He extended a hand. "Stephen Lang. I write for The Atlantic. I figured you were a writer. You listen better than most." He smiled. "That's kind of you. I'd like to write about this place about you, but I won't run anything without your permission." She hesitated. "What angle are you chasing?" "None," he said. "I'm not here for the scandal. I'm here because I think people forgot what power really looks like, and I think you've reminded them." She studied him a moment longer, then gestured toward a nearby booth. "We can talk for 15 minutes. After that, I've got a delivery order to double-check." They sat, and Maya spoke plainly. About the wedding, about the insult, about not kneeling not out of pride, but out of self-respect. She talked about Grant, but she never glorified him. She talked about her team, her grandmother, the quiet resistance in showing up with your whole self, every single day, even when no one notices. "What was the moment," Lang asked, leaning forward, "that made you realize things wouldn't go back to normal?" She was quiet, then said, "It was after the wedding blew up. I was walking home, still in uniform. I passed this little girl, maybe 10, sitting on her stoop. She looked at me and said, 'My mama said you didn't bow down. I want to be like you when I grow up.' That scared me more than anything, because I realized I wasn't invisible anymore. I couldn't be." Lang didn't speak for a long moment. Then, with a quiet nod, he said, "That's your story. The country needs to hear that." She agreed in one condition: no exploitation, no rehashing of trauma for clicks. If he wrote about her, he had to write about all of them: Carmen, Ruth, Marcus, the staff, the guests, the community. Lang promised. A week later, the article dropped. The maid who didn't kneeland. The restaurant that rose with her. It was thoughtful. No sensationalism, no tabloid-style drama. Just an honest, human story about pride, community, and a rising tide in the middle of Texas. The article went viral in ways no one expected. Donations came in. Local business leaders reached out asking to partner. Chefs from New Orleans, Atlanta, and even Chicago requested to train under Maya's team. Oprah's team called twice, but Maya never let the noise in. She showed up every morning, helped mop the floors, and kept the staff grounded. "You're going to be famous," Marcus joked one morning while slicing onions. "I don't want to be famous," Maya replied, tossing him a clean towel. "I want to be effective. But fame, as it happens, doesn't always ask for permission." Within 2 weeks of the article, a call came from the James Beard Foundation. Grant answered it, then walked into Maya's office holding his phone like it was on fire. "Maya, they want to nominate you for the Leadership Award." Maya blinked. "You're joking." They said your name came up 3 times. They're sending the paperwork today." She sat down slowly, still in her apron. I was just trying to stop a girl from humiliating me. "And now you're teaching the country what it means to stand," Grant said. "This is bigger than us." That night, Maya went home and pulled out the letter from Harold Kingsley again. She reread the final line, "Thank you for reminding this country of what grace under fire looks like." And she thought, maybe it wasn't just about fire. Maybe it was about warmth, the kind that spreads, the kind that feeds. Outside her window, the lights of Uprise glowed long after closing, not because someone forgot to flip the switch, but because some places, once lit, don't dim easily, not when they're built on purpose, not when they've been earned. The afternoon sun painted long amber streaks across the polished floors of Uprise as Maya sat in her small office tucked behind the kitchen. A gentle hum of conversation floated in from the dining room, muffled only by the sound of Ruth's gospel playlist humming low in the background. Maya was reviewing the weekend schedule. Marcus had called in to take his daughter to a school recital, and Carmen wanted time off to take her mother to the clinic. It was the kind of quiet leadership Maya cherished. Nothing flashy, just the daily mechanics of trust, responsibility, and care. Then a knock tapped gently on the doorframe. She looked up to see Grant. His expression was unreadable, which instantly made her cautious. "There's someone out front asking for you," he said slowly. "Press again?" "No. It's personnel." She rose, slipping the schedule clipboard aside. "You gonna give me a hint?" Grant scratched the back of his neck. "Let's just say he's wearing a suit too nice for this heat, and his accent isn't from around here." That was enough. Maya walked past him, her breath already shortening. She had a strange kind of premonition that this wasn't a customer, wasn't a fan. It was a shadow. The moment she turned the corner into the dining room, she saw him. Standing just inside the door, as if unsure whether he was welcome, was a tall, broad-shouldered black man in a charcoal suit. His salt and pepper beard was meticulously trimmed, and he carried himself like someone who was used to owning rooms without announcing it. Maya froze. Her heart stopped for half a beat. "Mr. Kingsley," she breathed. He turned, and for a moment, the hard lines of his expression softened. "Miss William." The room quieted just slightly as staff and diners took notice. Maya motioned for him to follow her, leading him to the private lounge area they sometimes used for overflow or sensitive conversations. Once inside, she closed the door. "I didn't think I'd ever see you here." Harold Kingsley, billionaire businessman and Maya's former employer's adoptive father, didn't sit. Instead, he looked around the room, slowly, like he was trying to understand what exactly had emerged from the ashes of that ruined wedding. "I read the article," he said finally, "and then I read the follow-up. I figured I owed you a visit." Maya folded her arms across her chest. "You owe me nothing." "No," he said, looking her in the eye. "I owe you everything. And so does my son." Her breath caught. "He still hasn't spoken to me," Kingsley added, lowering himself into one of the chairs with a sigh. "But I don't blame him. I was blind. To her mother, to how my silence gave them permission to act like they did." Maya sat slowly across from him, her posture still guarded. Kingsley looked up. "That day, I saw the video. Of you standing. Of her yelling. I didn't say a word. I was sitting beside friends who laughed like it was nothing. And I did nothing." Maya said nothing. Her silence was heavier than any accusation. "But what you've done since," his voice cracked slightly. "You didn't just stand. You built. You didn't tear them down, Maya. You lifted everyone else up." She looked at him carefully. "Why are you really here?" He hesitated. "Because I want to help. Quietly. No headlines. No handshakes for cameras. I want to invest. I want to give you whatever you need to take this further." She stared, unmoving. "You think this is something money can fix?" No, he admitted. I think this is something money should follow. There's a difference. She considered him, the sincerity in his voice, the weariness in his eyes, but also the privilege that still clung to him like an old cologne. You want to help, she said finally. Then help the people I help. Not just the restaurant. Fund the scholarship program we're starting. Support the food truck project in East Austin. Give kids something they can own, not just rent. He blinked, then nodded, slowly. You already have a plan. I've had a plan since the moment that girl screamed at me, she replied. I just stopped waiting for someone else to approve it. He stood. I'll get my people in touch, quietly. As he turned to leave, he paused. One more thing, Maya. She raised an eyebrow. I hope someday my son finds it in his heart to speak to me again. But until then, I'm glad he walked away from that altar. Because you showed him the kind of strength his father forgot to teach him. She didn't reply. Just let the words settle into the silence like ash on water. After he left, Maya sat alone for several minutes. She wasn't sure what shook her more, the fact that Harold Kingsley had come at all, or the possibility that his regret was real. Later that evening, Maya walked through the restaurant after closing. The chairs were stacked, the floors clean, and the scent of sweet potato and rosemary still lingered in the air. She ended up back at her office, only to find a small envelope slipped under the door. She picked it up. No name, no logo, just her name handwritten in looping cursive, Maya William. Inside was a check 7 figures and a sticky note, with 3 words. For the next one. No signature. She stared at it for a long while. Then she opened her desk drawer and slipped the check inside, not into her account, but into the folder labeled Community Equity Fund, Launch Phase. She closed the drawer with finality and whispered to herself, let's make them proud. Back at the kitchen, Ruth was humming again, wiping the counters for the 3rd time that day. Marcus had just finished locking the back door. Carmen was sitting on a stool scrolling through tomorrow's prep list. They were ready for the next wave, because the work never ended. And Maya had just opened the door to something far bigger than a restaurant. She had opened the door to a movement rooted not in resistance, but in rebirth. Built not on vengeance, but vision. And it was only just beginning. A week after the envelope arrived, Maya stood in front of a group of local small business owners in a modest community center off East 12th Street. The folding chairs creaked, the AC unit buzzed with tired effort, but the room pulsed with something electric hope. She cleared her throat, hands gripping the sides of the podium tighter than she meant to. I'm not here to talk about charity, she began. I'm here to talk about power. A few raised eyebrows met her bold tone. She continued. Power is when you own your space. When you can hire your neighbors, feed your people, and write your own contracts. For too long, we've been told we have to wait for someone to give us that. Not anymore. There was a murmur of approval. One older man in the second row, Mr. Colton, who'd run a soul food diner since 1974, nodded slowly. That nod meant something. We're launching the Community Equity Fund this fall, Maya announced. It's not just money. It's mentorship. It's credit building. It's legal support. It's every tool we never had but always deserved. A young Latina woman at the back raised her hand. Are you only supporting food businesses? No, Maya said, smiling. We're starting with what we know, but the goal is broader. Barbershops, bookstores, art studios. If it feeds the soul or the mind, it matters. The room erupted in light applause. Maya felt her throat tighten. This wasn't the wedding scene, where she'd stood under scrutiny and judgment. This was something new. This was ground rising beneath her feet. Later, as chairs were folded and coffee cups tossed, Marcus approached her, sleeves rolled up, sweat at his temples. You did good, he said, tapping her arm. Real good. She exhaled. I keep waiting for it all to collapse. He laughed. That's how you know it's real. Fake stuff doesn't make your stomach flip like this. She smiled faintly. I should get back. Ruth's training the new pastry chef tonight. They walked toward the car, the setting sun casting their long shadows down the cracked sidewalk. Just before they reached Maya's old sedan, Marcus paused. By the way, he said, you got a visitor earlier today. Oh? Didn't leave a name, but he asked about you. Said he used to know you back when you wore an apron and carried trays. Maya raised an eyebrow. Customer? Didn't sound like it. Sounded more personal. The next day, just after the lunch rush, she saw him, standing just outside the restaurant's patio gate in a tailored gray vest and rolled-up sleeves, was Noah Benton, the last person she'd expected to see. Maya stepped outside slowly, wiping her hands on a towel. "Noah?" He turned. His face was thinner, slightly paler than she remembered, but his eyes the same piercing blue locked on hers. "I didn't know if you'd let me talk to you." She folded her arms, unsure whether she wanted to hug him or send him away. "What are you doing here?" "I needed to see you," he said. "To say I'm sorry." Her jaw tightened. "Sorry for what, Noah? For letting me stand alone? For not speaking up when I was humiliated in front of your family?" He flinched. "Yes, all of it." The silence between them stretched. "I was a coward," he said, voice low. "You stood taller that day than I've stood in years." Maya took a breath. "And now?" "I left the Kingsleys," he said. "Gave up the name. I've been working with an educational nonprofit in Oakland, teaching coding to kids in public schools." She blinked. That she hadn't expected. "I kept thinking of what you said. About building, not breaking. I didn't know how to make it right, but I had to start somewhere." She looked at him, really looked. He wasn't the groom she remembered from the altar lost between his fiancé and his father. He looked worn, but not weak. "And now?" she repeated. "I want to help," he said. "Not for credit. Just because I believe in what you're doing. I believe in you." Maya hesitated. Her heart wanted to race ahead, but her mind remained cautious. "Help how?" "I have connections," he said. "Good ones. Foundations. Funders. I can make introductions. Quietly. Let the work speak." She considered it. Finally, she nodded. "You'll work with Marcus," she said. "You'll show up early, stay late, and never speak for us." He smiled, a little sad, a little relieved. "Deal." The weeks that followed moved like fast-forward tape. The food truck program launched with 3 old vehicles purchased at auction and transformed by local artists. The scholarship fund accepted its first batch of applicants kids whose parents had never even dreamed of college. A small bookstore reopened with help from the equity fund, run by a retired teacher who cried when Maya handed her the first grant check. Maya barely had time to sleep. One night, she sat alone on the rooftop of her apartment building, watching the downtown skyline flicker. Ruth joined her, 2 mugs of mint tea in hand. "You okay, baby?" Maya took the cup. "I think so. Feels like something's coming," Ruth said. "Some big change." Maya nodded. "I feel it too." They sipped in silence. Then Maya said, almost whispering, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had just knelt that day? Said I was sorry and moved on?" Ruth turned, eyes fierce. "Number. Because the girl who would have knelt ain't the woman building all this now." Maya smiled. It was small but real. The next day, a journalist from the New York Times called. They'd heard about Uprise, the fund, the food trucks. They wanted to feature Maya, a cover story. She hesitated, then said, "Only if you also talk to Ruth, and Carmen, and Marcus, and the kids who got the scholarships. This isn't about me." The reporter paused, then agreed. 2 weeks later, the headline ran, "The Maid Who Stood and Then Lifted Others." People across the country read it. Some cried, some gave, others just nodded, silently recognizing something that had long needed to be said. And somewhere, in a quiet house in Savannah, a white mother who once shouted in rage and shame at a black girl on her wedding day read the article in silence. She closed the paper and wept. The day after the article dropped, Maya walked into the kitchen of the restaurant to the sound of clapping. Her entire staff gathered near the prep tables, applauding as she walked in, flushed from the morning rush. Ruth stepped forward, arms crossed but eyes gleaming with pride. "So, Miss Cover Star, you gonna forget us now that you're famous?" Maya laughed, a little embarrassed. "The minute I forget y'all, I better be struck by lightning." But beneath the laughter she felt the weight of it. The article had triggered something bigger than pride. Phone calls poured in, donors, reporters, curious onlookers, but also hate mail, comments that were vile, cruel, whispers that she was playing the race card, turning a private moment into a public spectacle. Maya didn't flinch. She'd already faced the worst humiliation in front of white linen tables and $1,000 cake. Words couldn't shake her anymore. But something did rattle her that afternoon. Marcus called her into the office, voice unusually tense. "You need to see this." She followed him inside, where his laptop was open on the desk. He tapped the screen. It was a video, low quality, shaky, clearly recorded on a phone. At first, just the image of a parking lot. Then shouting. The familiar voice of Whitney Kingsley, the ex-bride. "I don't care what that little maid is doing now," she screamed at someone off-screen. "This won't last. Her kind always overreaches. They'll turn on each other like they always do." Maya's stomach turned. Then came the second voice, a man's. "Whitney, this is being recorded. I don't care. Let them see. I'm not apologizing for telling the truth." The clip ended. Maya stared at the screen for a long moment. "Where did this come from?" she asked. Marcus exhaled. "Anonymous submission. Someone inside their family, I think. The story's already spreading on Twitter." For a brief second, Maya felt the sting of old wounds reopen. Not because Whitney's words surprised her, they didn't, but because it proved how deep the poison still ran, even after all that had happened. "I don't want to engage," Maya said quietly. "I don't want to fight her in the press. Let her rot in her own venom." Marcus nodded. "You sure? This could bury her completely." She looked out the window, where the late sun streaked across the pavement. Then she shook her head. "I'm not here to bury anyone. I'm here to build." But karma didn't wait for her permission. By that weekend, Whitney's family was in full crisis mode. Their business deals, several of them already fragile, began to collapse. Sponsors pulled out. A major wedding fashion brand distanced itself publicly, citing a failure in values alignment. And the biggest blow came when her mother's interior design company lost its top investor after the clip aired on national news. Meanwhile, the restaurant doubled in reservations, not because Maya was chasing fame, but because people, especially those who had felt silenced, wanted to be part of something real, something rooted in dignity. One night, after hours, Maya sat on the back steps with Marcus. The air smelled of rosemary and citrus from the herb garden. The city buzzed gently in the background. "She's falling apart," Marcus said. "Whitney, her whole image is imploding." Maya didn't answer right away. She always cared more about image than truth. She finally said, "This was inevitable." He studied her face. "Do you feel vindicated?" She turned to look at him. "I feel exhausted." They sat in silence. Then he added, "You still think we shouldn't respond?" Maya considered it. "I think we already did. With every meal we serve, every person we hire, every kid we help fund." Marcus smiled faintly. "You're relentless." "I'm consistent," she corrected. The following week, Maya received an unexpected invitation, an all-expenses-paid trip to Washington, D.C., to speak at a congressional roundtable on racial equity in the service industry. She almost declined. She didn't like the spotlight, but it was Ruth who insisted. "You don't go for you," Ruth said, standing with her arms akimbo. "You go for the ones who'll never get invited, the maids who still cry in back hallways, the dishwashers no one sees." So she went. Capitol Hill was colder than she expected, polished, intimidating. But when Maya stood at the microphone and looked at the semicircle of senators and leaders before her, she didn't shake. Her voice was low, steady. "I'm not here as a victim," she began. "I'm here as a witness." She told them about the day she was humiliated, about the pressure to kneel, the eyes watching, the silence that followed. "But that day didn't define me," she said. "What defined me was what I did next." A senator asked if she believed change was possible. "I believe in people," Maya said. "Systems? They change slowly. But heart charts can crack open in a second. I've seen it." After her speech, several aides approached her with cards, offers, questions. One older senator, gray-haired, with tired eyes, shook her hand for a long time. "My mother was a maid," he said. "She never spoke up. Thank you for doing what she couldn't." Back home, the team welcomed her with a surprise dinner. Candlelit tables, homemade dishes, laughter echoing off the walls. Noah stood near the bar, smiling as she entered. They hadn't spoken much since his return, but he was there, present, helping, quiet. After dessert, Ruth raised a glass. To Maya, for refusing to kneel, and for showing the rest of us how to rise. The room clapped. Maya, red-faced, raised her own glass. To all of us, she said, for standing. Later that night, Maya stayed behind after the staff left, walking through the quiet dining area, running her fingers lightly along the edges of the tables. She stopped at one particular booth, one she always avoided. The same layout as the table from that wedding. Same curve, same corner. She sat down, closed her eyes, and for the first time, let herself cry. Not out of sadness, but out of something deeper, release. Because the table had turned, and this time, she was the one writing the menu. The morning air carried a strange stillness, a kind Maya hadn't felt since the first day she stood under the ruined wedding canopy, trembling but defiant. Now, months later, the restaurant thrived, overflowing not just with guests but with purpose. Yet even amidst this success, a quiet part of her still carried that moment. The moment she didn't kneel. She stood behind the front counter, scanning the reservation list. Today was fully booked, a Saturday brunch with a guest list that included a local mayor, a retired school principal, and even a pastor who once marched with Dr. King. But one name on the list made her pause. Elisa Kingsley. Maya stared at it, lips parting in shock. Her fingers clenched the paper a little tighter than they should have. Eliza, Whitney's mother. Maya? Marcus came up beside her. Everything all right? She hesitated, then handed him the list. He noticed the name immediately. You want me to cancel? Number. She shook her head slowly. Let her come. The news traveled quickly among the staff. Ruth raised an eyebrow when she heard. That woman said awful things about you, baby. You sure you want to serve her eggs Benedict and smile like it's Sunday morning? Maya managed a tight smile. She's coming here. To my space. That's already enough. At precisely 10:30 a.m., the glass doors opened, and Eliza Kingsley entered. Her posture was rigid, like she was bracing herself. Her eyes scanned the room with suspicion, as if she expected to be gawked at. Dressed in a soft blue blouse and pearl earrings, she looked like she was trying to blend in, but her discomfort was evident. Maya approached calmly. Welcome to the turning table. Do you have a reservation? Elisa's eyes flinched. Yes, under Kingsley. Right this way. Maya led her to a window table near the flower bed, quiet, with just enough privacy. Eliza sat stiffly, hands folded on her lap. As Maya placed the menu in front of her, Eliza's voice cracked the silence. I didn't come here to cause trouble. I assumed that, Maya replied gently. But if you had, I have a team ready to escort you out. Eliza chuckled nervously. I wouldn't blame you. Maya gave her a small nod. Someone will be right with you. She turned to leave, but Eliza reached out. Wait. Maya paused. Eliza lowered her voice. I read everything. The interviews. The articles. I saw the video too. Maya said nothing. I didn't know it was going to be like that. Eliza continued. At the wedding, I didn't know Whitney would say those things. Maya slowly turned back to face her. You didn't stop her either. Eliza looked down. Number I didn't. I stood there. I let it happen. I let my daughter shame a woman who did nothing wrong except stand with dignity. Maya didn't soften. Not yet. Eliza reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. This was meant to be a check, a donation. But I realized money doesn't fix everything. So instead, I wrote a letter. If you're willing to read it. Maya took the envelope but didn't open it. She tucked it into her apron and offered a short nod. Enjoy your brunch. Later that afternoon, after the rush, Maya stepped into the break room and opened the envelope. Inside, handwritten on cream stationery, were 2 pages. It began, Dear Maya, I raised a daughter who thought she was better than you because I let her believe she was. I raised her to smile at the maid and thank the staff, but I never taught her that being served doesn't make you superior. It only makes you responsible. Maya read every word, and when she finished, she folded the letter neatly, pressed it to her chest, and let out a long, shaking breath. That evening, Marcus found her outside, sitting under the olive tree in the garden with the letter beside her. Want company? He asked. She nodded, and he sat beside her on the bench. You okay? She tilted her head back, watching the leaves sway. I finally believe I am. Want to talk about it? She said sorry, in a real way, not just the kind you toss around to ease guilt. The kind you feel in your gut. Marcus leaned back. Forgiveness is tricky. It doesn't erase things, but it can make room. Maya glanced at him. Room for what? For peace. Maybe healing. They sat in silence for a while. Then Marcus said, "Do you remember the day we first met?" She laughed. "Of course. I was holding a tray of champagne glasses, and you stepped in the way, and you told me to move. I didn't know you were the groom." He smiled. "You didn't care. That's what struck me." She turned to him, finally asking something she'd been meaning to for weeks. "Why didn't you go through with the wedding? You could have ignored it, smoothed it over." He looked at her seriously. "Because I didn't just hear her insult you. I heard her insult my father. And if she couldn't love where I came from, she couldn't love me." Maya looked down. "Your father. Was he proud of you for walking away?" Marcus nodded slowly. "He told me that day, 'Son, the hardest part of being black in power is knowing when to lose something that isn't worth winning.' I never forgot that." The wind picked up slightly, rustling the trees. The last light of evening painted their skin gold. "You know," Maya said softly, "for all the damage that day caused, I wouldn't change it." Marcus looked at her, searching her expression. "It broke something open," she continued. "In me, in you, in this whole place. And sometimes, broken is where the light gets in." He smiled, deeply moved. Inside, the restaurant buzzed with evening energy. Maya stood, brushing her hands off her apron. "I should get back in there." Marcus followed her. "You know what's wild?" "What?" "You're not just building a restaurant, Maya. You're building a whole new table." She paused at the threshold, heart full. "And this time," she said, "everyone's invited." 3 months had passed since Eliza Kingsley walked into the turning table and left behind a letter that stitched shut wounds Maya never thought would heal. But healing, Maya had learned, didn't mean forgetting. It meant remembering without flinching. And today, that lesson was about to be tested once more. The fall breeze carried the scent of cinnamon and roasted squash from the kitchen. Golden leaves danced across the cobblestone entrance of the restaurant. Maya adjusted the collar of her dark green manager's uniform and greeted guests with her usual warmth, her smile both gracious and steady. The restaurant was fuller than ever, reservations booked weeks in advance. But this evening, a different kind of tension hummed beneath the celebration. Whitney was coming. Marcus had warned her gently the day before. She reached out, said she wanted to speak with you. She didn't ask for a table, just time. Maya had nodded, quietly surprised she didn't feel fear, just curiosity, and a strange, sad kind of calm. At 6:05 p.m., as the amber lights bathed the restaurant in its signature glow, Whitney stepped through the front doors. She was thinner than Maya remembered, her face pale and strained under careful makeup. Gone were the diamonds, the tight bun, the designer heels. She wore flats and a charcoal gray sweater over slacks. In her arms, she held a simple bouquet of sunflowers. Maya approached her with measured steps. "You came." Whitney's eyes were uncertain. "I didn't think you'd agree to see me." "You didn't come for a table," Maya said flatly. "Just words." Whitney swallowed hard and held out the bouquet. "These are. I know it's not enough, but I didn't know how to show up empty-handed." Maya accepted them without comment, set them gently behind the host stand. "Let's talk in the garden." They walked through the side doors to the private garden seating area normally reserved for quiet brunches and VIP meetings. Tonight, it was empty, except for a small bistro table beneath the willow tree. The same spot where Maya had once sat with Marcus, the letter from Eliza pressed to her heart. They sat across from each other in silence. The willow branches swayed. A nearby wind chime sang soft metallic notes. "I didn't recognize myself that day," Whitney said finally, her voice trembling. "At the wedding. But I also did, and that's what scared me." Maya listened but didn't interrupt. "I thought I had values. I thought I saw people clearly. But the moment I felt threatened socially, emotionally I lashed out, and the ugliest part of me spoke." Maya's gaze was steady. "You didn't just lash out, Whitney. You demanded that I kneel." Whitney's eyes filled. "I know. I've replayed it 1,000 times. And when you didn't, when you stood there, calm and proud, something in me cracked. I hated it then. But now, I think, I was envious. Maya leaned back slightly. You were about to marry a man raised by a black father, a man who offered you his name, his life, and you saw his pride as something to tame. Whitney lowered her head. I know I lost more than a wedding that day. I lost him. I lost myself. And I came here tonight not to beg for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve that, but to thank you. That caught Maya off guard. Thank me? For waking me up, for making me look in the mirror. My mother never did. The people in my world never did. But you didn't flinch when the world was watching. You gave me a moment I couldn't run from. Maya didn't speak right away. She looked up at the stars beginning to appear beyond the leaves. Do you know what it's like? Maya said quietly. To carry generations of silence in your spine. To be told over and over, in ways subtle and loud, that you don't belong